Good morning, 3rd of May 2020. This is a video continuing the associations of consuls. It is indeed important that all the consuls of members of the association, therefore the fees for entrance are not necessary, because this really cuts the percentage of consuls that are not active. So if we had 100% members and 100% consuls, like in any other association, the representation and the ideas of the intrinsic value would be much greater. The previous 100 years discrimination of general consuls of career with regards of honorary consuls is something of great concern. As mentioned before, spoken to the different associations of consuls in Spain, that does not happen like in Bilbao. These have to be finished so that in the future we have locals that can go and run for president or dean. The last 100 years we had the UK, France, Morocco, as I mentioned earlier, and this is not possible. No honorary consul has been able to be the dean. This is why I wrote in LinkedIn and other publications, Deangate, because it is very important that discrimination stops, because most of these general career consuls that get paid for the job are indeed highly educated and highly respectable diplomats, that they must really avoid discrimination, so that it must be made public that using Vienna Convention that was written in 1970 and buying back those articles, it is something very old, because the consuls that signed this Vienna agreement were most of them general consuls. Therefore, they were looking after the interests of their own jobs. So then the intrinsic value that we can increase locally, it is great concern. It is a pity that since I was consul 20 years ago, and still are, that Finland's companies have not invested in the Basque Country or in Spain. Why? Because we can inform the basic tax rates, inquisition taxes, social security, the process of, say, education, it's cut. If you want to be a merchant officer, then you can go from the lower ranks of rating up. This in Finland works in all the different stages of education towards having professionals that are required by the, say, merchant, by the labor market. So that the labor market requires software specialists, programmers, and then the society and the government educates this from the 6-year-old until they are older. And that's another problem in Spain, to find the right professions. This vertical approach for the training is very important, so that we have education and unemployment united. The unemployment rate is so low in Finland because then if you have to cut the cost, the labor cost of a company, automatically you do not have to pay indemnities like in Spain. So you do not have to make the business person, the small and medium company, pay for taking away this cost that they cannot afford to avoid losses and continue with the company. And the state takes care for 2 years of these unemployment benefits, so there is no indemnity, and they are trained for the trends of the labor market. This is not happening also in Spain. That is one of the ideas that we could provide in this kind of associations. Recommendation towards what we, with no real interest in any conflict, then we can signal which is the way that other countries are doing. Let's take into account that Finland is #1 in the world in this kind of training and unemployment, so that then all the workers can be reincorporated into the labor market very well trained indeed. Another area is the fines. No one calculates the fines that we have in European Union. This intrinsic value has to be calculated, and the Consul Association can really put a benchmark of which are the countries, like in coronavirus, which are in the countries that the fines of the Inquisition of the Social Security in Spain, for example, or the local taxes compared to other countries. Because if you fine people, if you put fences in houses like there are in Spain and there is not in Finland, then people are responsible. And this is something that responsibility has to be taught towards this association. Having digital, like this video, agendas shows that we can really provide benchmark and intrinsic value calculation of all the areas that we do. The targets are very clear. It's education, it's health, security, small and medium companies. It's a pity that Finland cannot invest more in Spain, because if they watch this video, they will see that the number of Finnish companies in my Basque country has gone from 5 to 2. And the reason being is the arguments I already mentioned. And it's a pity that this consul cannot provide ideas towards foreign companies giving more jobs in my city. There is obviously another conflict of interest regarding the general consuls and the honorary consuls. We can provide ideas as members of association independent from our job as consul. So if I am a member of an association, I am an honorary consul, I can provide ideas that the country I represent, Finland, there is no conflict. So they respect that the ideas and the value that we can add here is as members of association, not representing the country. And this is a very important point, because it gives us a whole scope of competence where we can supply these values with no conflict to the country. And this is really a competitive advantage regarding the career general consuls, because they are not allowed to say or vote things that they are not approved by their boss, the ambassador or the Ministry of Foreign, because they have to abide that kind of orders. We, the honorary consuls, have that liberty, which is a great advantage, because you can be a member of association as a general consul, but the honorary consuls take control, because they are free to provide value without having to ask permission, because we have no conflict of interest in that respect. This is an area of interest that before it was not really looked at, and it could be in a positive way adapted to all the associations in the world, because the numbers we represent are much bigger. Another conflict of interest, conflict number 2, is that plenty consuls are affiliated to a political party. And that is really a conflict of interest. If you are a consul, you do not have to abide by any political ideas. Well, perhaps you have your own, but then you do not have to be affiliated. And this is one of the checklists that we in Merge Marine would check if the compliance in that respect does abide the rules of being a consul. On the other conflict of interest, we also have consuls that are employed by public administrations. Here in Bilbao, out of the 40 honorary consuls, let's say some 6 are employed by public administrations, and that is a huge conflict of interest. Why? Because they have to obey instructions and they are being paid. They are not independent as member of association. This is a huge conflict that today's consuls have to be appointed only if they have no conflict of interest of being employed by a public administration. Because when we go into elections, then the directors normally they unite themselves, and if we have, say, public employed consuls, they normally unite towards having the famous plate or plancha. That means that if you want to appoint a president, then you must have a board of directors that all are of the same affinity. Normally, the public employees vote and unite in order to have control of the association. So in case that this association stops being presidency by the general consuls, because in numbers they are much less and they don't respect the intrinsic value of the place they represent as much as we could, the honorary consuls. The other risk and the other conflict of interest we have, the honorary consuls, is that the plate, or as it's called in Spain, the plancha of directors, are always going to push forward the public employees, so that at the end the association is not going to be controlled by the pure interests of the intrinsic value of the association. But if we are going to work, for example, into improving education, and they work for the public administration, they